that's why Prabhupada did this. And Prabhupada was waiting for us to come for this, and he was trying to drag us as best he could. And maybe we weren't very successful, but he delivered us in this way.
Namaste. Dhanavat Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're also paying our humble Dhanavat Pranam to Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada for providing us this wonderful commentary and translation of Bhagavatam. And following the guidance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, we are praying to Srimati Radharani. Yadi seva vanchitasya ma yasya kripaya vayam labema sarvam prapnuma prayojanam damni Shri Bhagavat Pade Krishna sambandhi sarvam cha Yadi na jani mahetutam ashtadashasu sahasreshu shlokanam bhagavat otishu radharanim navindamatada nishphalam bhagavat adhyayanam radhikaya kripam vina vyartasyat sarva parishrama. If we are cheated out of serving that personality whose mercy awards us everything we need, including residence in the Lord's holy Dham and all things connected to Krishna, and if we cannot understand or discover Radharani within the 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, then our study of the Srimad Bhagavatam has been pointless. Without the mercy of Srimati Radharani, all our efforts are in vain. So we are continuing from Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order, chapter 28. Purañjana becomes a woman in the next life, text 17. Aham mameti svikritya griheshu kumatir grihi Tadyo pramadaya dino viprayoga upastite. King Purañjana was overly attached to his family and concepts of I and mine. Because he was overly attracted to his wife, he was already quite poverty-stricken. At the time of separation, he became very sorry. It is clear in this verse that at the time of death, thoughts of material enjoyment do not go away. This indicates that the living entity, the soul, is carried by the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego. Due to false ego, the living entity still wants to enjoy the material world, and for want of material enjoyment, he becomes sorry or sad. He still makes intellectual plans to further his existence, and therefore, although he gives up the gross body, he is carried by the subtle body to another gross body. The transmigration of the subtle body is never visible to material eyes. Therefore, when one gives up the gross body, we think he is finished. Plans for material enjoyment are made by the subtle body, and the gross body is the instrument for enjoying these plans. Thus, the gross body can be compared to the wife, for the wife is the agent for all kinds of sense gratification. Because of long association with the gross body, the living entity becomes very sad to be separated from it. The mental activity of the living entity obliges him to accept another gross body and continue his material existence. The Sanskrit word Sri means expansion. Through the wife, one expands his various objects of attraction, sons, daughters, grandsons, and so on. Attachment to family members becomes very prominent at the time of death. One often sees that just before leaving his body, a man may call for his beloved son to give him charge of his wife and other paraphernalia. He may say, "My dear boy, I am being forced to leave. Please take charge of the family affairs." He speaks in this way, not even knowing his destination. Text 18. Lokantaram gatavati mayanatta kutumbini vartisyate katam tvesha balakan anusochati. King Purañjana was anxiously thinking, "Alas, my wife is encumbered by so many children. When I pass from this body, how will she be able to maintain all these family members? Alas, she will be greatly harassed by thoughts of family maintenance." Purport. All these thoughts of one's wife indicate that the king was overly engrossed with thoughts of women. Generally, a chaste woman becomes a very obedient wife. This causes a husband to become attached to his wife, and consequently he thinks of his wife very much at the time of death. This is a very dangerous situation, as it is evident from the life of King Purañjana. If one thinks of his wife instead of Krishna at the time of death, he will certainly not return home back to Godhead, but will be forced to accept the body of a woman and thus begin another chapter of material existence. Text 19. Namai anasite bhunkte nashnate snati matpara mai rushte sushantrasta bhartishte yata bhagbayat. King Purañjana then began to think of his past dealings with his wife. He recalled that his wife would not take her dinner until he had finished his, that she would not take her bath until he had finished his, and that she was always very much attached to him, so much so that if he would sometimes become angry and chastise her, she would simply remain silent and tolerate his misbehavior. Purport. A wife is always supposed to be submissive to her husband. Submission, mild behavior, and subservience are qualities in a wife which make a husband very thoughtful of her. For family life, it is very good for a husband to be attached to his wife, but it is not very good for spiritual advancement. Thus, Krishna consciousness must be established in every home. If a husband and wife are very much attached to one another in Krishna consciousness, they will both benefit, because Krishna is the center of their existence. Otherwise, if the husband is too much attached to his wife, and he becomes a woman in his next life. The woman, being overly attached to her husband, becomes a man in her next life. Of course, it is an advantage for a woman to become a man, but it is not at all advantageous for the man to become a woman. Text 20. Prabodhayati ma vigyan vyusite shoka karshita Vatmaitad griha medhiyam virasor api nesyati. King Purañjana continued thinking how, when he was in a state of bewilderment, his wife would give him good counsel, and how she would become aggrieved when he was away from home. Although she was the mother of so many sons and heroes, the king still feared that she would not be able to maintain the responsibility of household affairs. Purport. At the time of death, King Purañjana was thinking of his wife, and this is called polluted consciousness. As Lord Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita 15.7, Mamaivam so jivha loke jivha bhutta sanatana manashastan indriyani prakriti stani karshati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with 6 senses, which include the mind. The living entity is, after all, part and parcel of the Supreme Spirit. Krishna, in other words, Krishna's constitutional position and the living entity's constitutional position are the same qualitatively. The only difference is that the living entity is eternally an atomic particle of the Supreme Spirit. Vamso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. In this material world of conditional life, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Spirit, Supreme Lord, the individual soul, is struggling due to his contaminated mind and consciousness. As part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, a living entity is supposed to think of Krishna. But here we see that King Purañjana, the living entity, is thinking of a woman. Such mental absorption with some sense object brings about the living entity's struggle for existence in this material world. Since King Purañjana is thinking of his wife, his struggle for existence in the material world will not be ended by death. As revealed by the following verses, King Purañjana had to accept the body of a woman in his next life due to his being overly absorbed in thoughts of his wife. Thus, mental absorption in social, political, pseudo-religious, national, and communal consciousness is a cause for bondage. During one's lifetime, one has to change his activities in order to attain release from bondage. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 3.9. Yagyartat karma no nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. If we do not change our consciousness in this life, whatever we do in the name of social, political, religious, or communal and national welfare will be the cause of our bondage. This means we have to continue in material conditional life. As explained in Bhagavad Gita 15.7, manashasthanindriyani prakriti-stani karshati. When the mind and senses are engaged in material activities, one has to continue his material existence to struggle and attain happiness. In each and every life, one is engaged in the struggle to become happy. Actually, no one in this material world is happy, but the struggle gives a false sense of happiness. A person must work very hard, and when he attains the result of his hard work, he thinks himself happy. In the material world, people do not know what real happiness is. Shukam atyantikam yatad buddhi grahayam atindriyam. Bhagavad Gita 6.21. Real happiness must be appreciated by one's transcendental senses. Unless one is purified, the transcendental senses are not manifest. Therefore, to purify the senses, one must take to Krishna consciousness and engage the senses in the service of the Lord. Then there will be real happiness and liberation. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita 15.8, Sarhiram yad avapnoti yachchapyut kramatishvara grihit vaitani samyati vayor gandan ivasayat. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another as the air carries aromas. If the wind passes over a garden of roses, it will carry the aroma of roses, and if it passes over a filthy place, it will carry the stench of obnoxious things. Similarly, King Purañjana, the living entity, now passes the air of his life over his wife, a woman. Therefore, he has to accept the body of a woman in his next life. Text 21. Katamnu dharakadina dharakirva parayana vartisyante maigate vinanava ibhodadho. King Purañjana continued worrying, after I pass from this world, how will my sons and daughters, who are now fully dependent on me, live and continue their lives? Their position will be similar to that of passengers aboard a shipwreck in the midst of the ocean. Purport. At the time of death, every living entity worries about what will happen to his wife and children. Similarly, a politician also worries about what will happen to his country or his political party. Unless one is fully Krishna conscious, he has to accept the body in the next life according to his particular state of consciousness. Since Purañjana is thinking of his wife and children, and is overly engrossed in thoughts of his wife, he will accept the body of a woman. Similarly, a politician or so-called nationalist who is inordinately attached to the land of his birth will certainly be reborn in the same land after ending his political career. One's next life will also be affected by the acts one performs during this life. Sometimes politicians act most sinfully for their own sense gratification. It is not unusual for a politician to kill the opposing party. Even though a politician may be allowed to take birth in his so-called homeland, he still has to undergo suffering due to his sinful activities in his previous life. This science of transmigration is completely unknown to modern scientists. So-called scientists do not like to bother with these things because if they would at all consider the subtle subject matter and the problems of life, they would see that their future is very dark. Thus, they try to avoid considering the future and continue committing all kinds of sinful activities in the name of social, political, and national necessity. And thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 22 on Friday. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, Srila Acharya Dev Ki Jai. Jai Sri Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the worldwide devotees, Sama Bhaktivedanta Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Navadut Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Giri Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai, Sham Kund Radha Kund Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Scientific Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi Hari 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 Bol. Jai Shrimati Uma Devi Dasi Ki Jai. Hari Bol.